Interesting. Hi, my name's Steven. I've never done open mic before. I brazenly signed up my name expecting the bar to be somewhere down here, but the amount of talent I've seen tonight is amazing. More like up here. So I have some words to throw at you. Short story I wrote. No musical talent to speak of, but a lung full of words. The story is called 10 Paces. It was a quiet morning on a gravel lane just outside of the tiny, quiet town of Clemenstrail. A Huron's call echoed through the early morning fog. Along this quiet gravel lane stood two men, a soldier and a farmer, with a modest smattering of wordless spectators nearby. They stood back to back, the two men, each holding a pistol clenched in a white-knuckled grip, for they were here to duel. Not one day passed, an unspeakable affront was committed. Each man believed the other responsible. Words having failed them, a quick, decisive battle to the death was in order, here in next day's morning gloom. Each man glanced at their stopwatch. It was time. Adrenaline racing, each began to walking in slow, purposeful strides, counting up 1 pace, 2 paces, 3, 4. They marched, each burning with an intense desire to put a bullet through the heart of the other. 5, 6, 7. It was almost time. Time to end this quarrel, the life of the other man. 8, 9. Sweat beaded on foreheads. Hearts thumped loudly in each man's chest. It was time to gaze into the heart of death and roll the dice. 10. It was 10, right? The two men hesitated, neither able to see each other, but each simultaneously gripped in panic. The soldier and the farmer each searched the memory frantically, trying to recall the precise terms of the dueling arrangement that lay prior. It was 10 paces, wasn't it? 10, then fire, right? Each man took another pace. Another. Or maybe it was 15. 15 had a certain aesthetic ring to it. The soldier didn't dare to turn to fire just yet. After all, the farmer hadn't, and there was no way it was supposed to be 10 paces, or 15. The farmer, too, not wanting to be the fool who turned around too early, continued pacing, counting his steps. 19, 20. Each man took one step after the other down the autumny gravel lane, pistol clenched in the right hand. 24, 25. This was ridiculous. The soldier knew enough about firearms to know that neither man would be able to accurately hit the other at this range. How many paces had they agreed on? The two feverishly wondered. Both the soldier and the farmer were men of great pride in tiny Clemenstrail and refused to dishonorably fire early. 57, 58. Each man, if the other had dared turn, would have only been able to barely see each other far down the morning gloom along the gravel lane. The spectators who had come to watch stood confused and gaping by the side of the gravel lane. Some 570 paces later, both men were completely out of sight, each last seen marching ahead vigilantly. Some 30,000 paces, and an entire evening later, the soldier passed through a city, one he had never been to before. It was nearly midnight. He marched down the city boulevard, boots clacking on the cobblestone, still rigidly stepping forward, still holding his pistol in the same white-knuckled grip. Curious eyes looked in second-story windows to see the stony figure marching, armed, down the empty streets. The soldier's jerk-around coat was still soaked from last night's rain. 100,000 paces. The farmer was marching through a quiet field, far from his cozy home back in Clemenstrail. He had never been this far away from home in his life. Butterflies flitted lazily in the mid-afternoon air. He thought he saw 2 deer nuzzling near the forest edge, somewhere around 100,397 paces. Pistol loaded and ready, he marched onward. 300,412 paces. The soldier was pacing up a rocky trail into a long chain of unnamed mountains, many hundreds of miles away from his home back in tiny Clemenstrail. The snow-capped peaks of the mountain rose far, far up to the clouds, beyond the soldier's sight. Just shy of 500,000 paces, the farmer could see the ocean on the horizon, sparkling as the sunrise's gentle beams of light played off it. Seagulls cried out in the distance. The farmer's heart was warmed at the sight, but his grip on the pistol never lessened. He could not let himself forget the soldier's grave affront, yet he still didn't dare look behind him. The soldier's beard was white, with the weeks of unrelenting snow and frost. The soldier had never been up so high in the mountains before. What's more, he hadn't seen a city, or even a living person, in weeks. Was it 2,017,037 or 38? He couldn't remember. In truth, he was distracted. The clear morning air had a soothing effect on him. The beauty of the auroras at night would move him. Sometimes, during those auroras, he'd almost forget about the farmer in his favorite front. Almost. Teeth bared and pistol tight in his iron grip, the soldier hopped across dangerous loose rocks and down another snowy trail, leaving in his wake a line of evenly spaced, snowy footsteps. The farmer hadn't seen sunlight for over a month. His lungs hadn't breathed blissful air in what seemed like forever. His steps felt sluggish beneath the many hundreds of miles of ocean above him. 4,940,000 and something. Dozens of thick strands of seaweed had caught in the hem of his coat, were trailing in the water behind him. A strange, many-toothed creature had befriended the farmer, and had been swimming complacently alongside him for the last 10 days. He had seen gorgeous, brilliantly colored reefs teeming with aquatic life. Despite the burning hatred in the farmer's heart, he could not help but be touched by the beauty of the ocean and its inhabitants. Yet he marched onward, one watery footstep after the other. By this time, the soldier had counted off 7 million paces. The lonely mountains were a distant image at his back. He was somewhere deep, deep in a nameless desert, utterly bereft of life. His boots and most of his coat were torn away by wind and wear. What was left was filled with sand. The sun beat overhead relentlessly. Unsleeping, uneating, undrinking, the soldier continued to pace. Despite his best efforts, the smug, contemptible face of the farmer was becoming an increasingly indistinct blur in his mind. The farmer had seen many places as he marched his straight line away from that gravelly autumn road and tiny Clemens Trail. Beautiful, humid jungles, haunting deep caverns with crystals that grew larger than even an elephant. Deep bedded swamps. How many millions of miles had it been? All of these places, beyond being harsh, beyond anything the farmer had ever seen or known, were reflected in his weary eyes as marvels of great beauty. 8 million paces. It was a quiet, chilly morning near a cafe in Paris. It was just opening. The soldier stepped slowly down the paved lane, a street in an entirely unfamiliar language. His eyelids sagged. His once fine clothing had been reduced to colorless, bleached rags. His boots were worn, shapeless rags fused to his feet. He could just barely make out the shape of another man through the morning fog. Some disheveled, bearded fellow who was slowly approaching, barely holding onto a pistol, loaded with a single bullet. The owner was bringing out chairs from within the cafe, set up on the tables outside. He wiped the morning dew off each table with his apron, and put on white tablecloths. Hobbling along, the farmer suddenly stopped, just outside the cafe. Ahead of him, the other man, the soldier, stopped as well, face to face. The two were maybe 10 paces apart. The two men stared at each other for a long moment, each straining their memory, trying to place the familiar, haggard individual in front of them. Realization struck the soldier and the farmer nearly simultaneously. Adrenaline spiked, as each fumbled and struggled to raise their weapons first. In a mere instant, each had the pistol trained on the other's chest. Eyes widened. The farmer. Teeth were bared. The soldier. Running on pure instinct without thought, each pulled the trigger, intent to kill. Clack. Sand issued forth from the barrel of the soldier's pistol. It was jammed beyond repair from weeks in the desert. Part of the handle fell off and clattered to the cobblestones below. A bouquet of old dried seaweed fell out of the farmer's gun. It too was jammed beyond hope of ever again firing. Silence. From just at the edge of East Man's periphery, they heard, "Une table pour deux, monsieur?" Startled, the farmer and the soldier, pistols still trained on each other, looked toward the French waiter. A table was set up with a modest meal of tea and hot bread. The men, freshly unarmed, looked back to each other for a moment, and then, wordlessly, seated themselves in front of the irresistible meal. The two of them sat there for some number of hours, the soldier and the farmer. They exchanged tales of the beautiful wonders they had seen, the clear air of snow-capped mountains, the tallest trees imaginable deep in an unknown forest, the oppressive heat of uncharted jungles, and the stunning reefs and exotic creatures of the ocean's depths. Such sights and experiences were beyond what either man had ever known or could ever have conceived of. The world was beyond all imaginable grandness and splendor. Tiny Clemens Trail seemed all the more tiny. Sipping on their tea, the two men laughed at each other's adventures, wore in rags, and reminisced about their lives and petty disputes from before they agreed to duel on that fateful day. Slowly, Gradually, eventually, worn pistols clattered to the ground, forgotten. The farmer and the soldier drank their tea, ate the delicious warm bread, and laughed. When they had finished, the two resumed their march onward, but this time together. After all, it was a long trek back to Tiny Clemens Trail. Best not to make the trip alone this time.